Frédéric Vasseur has kicked Lewis Hamilton out after he admitted feeling useless at Ferrari. Want to know the real reasons? Wondering why the media hasn't reported this yet? Then this video is exactly what you need to see. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. There was no masking the bitterness on Lewis Hamilton's face after the Australian Grand Prix. No forced smiles. No rehearsed answers. No diplomatic detour around the uncomfortable truth. As he unfastened his helmet and tore it off in frustration, the world witnessed a seven-time world champion staring into the abyss of a team that had failed him once again, not through a catastrophic engine blowout or a pit lane disaster, but through something far more insidious, a slow, systematic erosion of confidence, chemistry, and control. The camera didn't need commentary. Hamilton's expression spoke volumes. But it wasn't until his fiery post-race interview that the motorsport universe realized how deep the cracks had become. Sweat beading down his temple, his voice strained but resolute. He looked into the lens and dropped the facade that had held through months of internal discontent. "I feel invisible out there," he said, with a cold finality that made every fan sit up straighter. "I push like hell every lap. I'm extracting everything I can from this car, and it gives me nothing. I'm not lost. I'm not confused. I know how to win. But this car, this team, they're not meeting me halfway." The interview went viral in minutes, sparking trending hashtags, polarizing opinions, and heated debates on every podcast, panel, and post-race breakdown. But what nobody knew, what no press outlet could see, was what unfolded moments later, behind closed doors inside Ferrari's pristine, soundproof motorhome. That's where the real story began. And thanks to leaked audio clips, insider testimonies, and whispered reports from trusted team personnel, we now know what really happened when Hamilton confronted the Scuderia hierarchy. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. He didn't wait for the debrief. He didn't strip out of his race suit. He marched into the engineering suite still dripping in frustration, demanding an audience with those responsible for his underwhelming machinery. The moment he entered, the temperature in the room dropped. Engineers froze. Aerodynamicists exchanged nervous glances. Leclerc, still cooling off with a hydration bottle in hand, watched from the sidelines. Hamilton's voice, at first calm, rapidly shifted into something ferocious and surgical. This wasn't an emotional rant. It was a masterclass in accountability. He dismantled the team's winter development path point by point, highlighting how the front-end responsiveness was wildly inconsistent from simulator to circuit. He pointed to telemetry discrepancies they had flagged in Bahrain that had gone unresolved in Jeddah and now haunted them in Melbourne. He demanded to know why promised upgrades had either under-delivered or mysteriously vanished from deployment schedules. But what truly sent shockwaves through the team was his accusation that Ferrari had built a one-driver car, a chassis fundamentally molded to suit Leclerc's aggressive input style while abandoning Hamilton's smoother, more balanced driving philosophy. "You didn't build a Ferrari," he reportedly shouted. "You built a Leclerc special. And I'm expected to make it work like it's universal. This isn't adaptation. It's sabotage masked as compromise." At that moment, Frédéric Vasseur stepped in, not with solutions, but with pleas for calm. Hamilton wasn't interested. He questioned why certain engineers had been sidelined in pre-season, despite being among those who helped shape Mercedes' golden era. He challenged the decision-making process that had greenlit the aero concept overhaul without cross-checking driver feedback. He didn't demand his own way, he demanded a shared way. Equal tools. Equal development. Equal investment. Inside sources say the room was divided. Some nodded in silent agreement, finally seeing a figure brave enough to say what many whispered in private. Others stared at the floor, unwilling to admit their strategies had backfired. And Leclerc, still seated in the corner, reportedly looked down, not in shame, but in recognition that the car's edge might be a double-edged sword. But the most damaging part wasn't Hamilton's rage. It was the aftermath. The stunned silence. The lack of rebuttal. The absence of a plan. Within 48 hours, key members of Hamilton's personal engineering staff began requesting internal transfers. Ferrari's data team locked down access to certain performance sheets. Technical directors began holding meetings without driver representatives. The team wasn't healing. It was splintering. Then came the leaks. A confidential PDF, meant only for Ferrari's executive engineering committee, somehow made its way to two independent F1 journalists known for their deep sources. That document, titled Phase 2 Aero Concept Risk Report, revealed damning details: a misalignment between wind tunnel data and track performance, inconsistencies in corner exit stability simulations, a newly discovered flaw in the underbody airflow design that disproportionately punished Hamilton's throttle mapping. The most shocking revelation? Ferrari knew about the problem before the season began, but chose to delay corrections until the European rounds. The media didn't get the full report, but they got enough. And they ran with it. Suddenly, questions exploded across the paddock. Why wasn't Ferrari transparent with its drivers? Why did Hamilton's side of the garage have delayed access to updated components? Why had Leclerc received a modified rear suspension arm in Saudi Arabia that Hamilton didn't get until Australia, and only after requesting it 3 times? The pressure was suffocating. PR shields went up. Ferrari cancelled media availability. Hamilton's social media went dark. Leclerc posted a cryptic message about keeping faith even when it's hard, which only added fuel to the speculation. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. And in the shadows, a storm was brewing. Hamilton's management, tight-lipped but deeply connected, began making calls. Not just to teams, but to power unit suppliers, simulator companies, technical consultants. McLaren was alerted. Aston Martin was curious. Audi listened. Nothing was promised, but everyone could feel the tremor. Lewis Hamilton was shopping his future. By the time the F1 circus arrived in Japan, it was no longer just about lap times. Hamilton was in a psychological duel with his own team. Every interview was a chess move. Every shrug, every pause, every refusal to comment was laced with subtext. His qualifying was again lackluster, P9. His race was anonymous, P7. But what spoke volumes wasn't the result. It was his tone. Flat. Detached. Unrecognizable. When asked post-race if he still believed in Ferrari's vision, his response was chillingly simple: belief only matters when it's mutual. Meanwhile, Leclerc was caught in the middle of an escalating internal war. Team meetings had become minefields. Engineers on Hamilton's side began isolating themselves. Whisper campaigns suggested Leclerc's feedback was prioritized. Trust was evaporating, not because of malice, but because of inertia, because no one was fixing it. The upcoming races, Imola, Barcelona, Silverstone, now carry a weight that goes beyond points. They will decide the future not just of Hamilton at Ferrari, but of Ferrari itself. Can a team divided down the middle truly fight for championships? Or will it collapse under the weight of its own refusal to listen? One thing is clear: this isn't just a sporting saga. It's a cultural battle. A fight between legacy and ego, between tradition and truth. Hamilton didn't come to Ferrari for the paycheck or the merch. He came to etch history. But history demands alignment. And right now, Ferrari looks more like a battlefield than a legacy. If change doesn't come, fast and without pretense, then the next time Hamilton leaves a Ferrari garage, it might be his last. And this time, he won't be walking away from a bad car. He'll be walking away from broken promises. The atmosphere inside the Ferrari motorhome was suffocating, dense with unease, as if the entire structure was holding its breath. Team members whispered behind half-shut laptops. Mechanics shuffled awkwardly with their heads down. No one dared speak above a murmur, not after what had just happened in front of the world. On the screens, Lewis Hamilton's post-race interview was still being replayed, blunt, raw, unapologetically honest. Every word he had spoken had hit Maranello like a wrecking ball. Just minutes after stepping off the pit lane, still in his fireproof suit, helmet under one arm and sweat-soaked balaclava in the other, Hamilton walked into the team suite with heavy, deliberate steps. His face was unreadable. Neither angry nor calm. Just carved from stone. He dropped into a seat in the corner, grabbed a bottle of water, and stared blankly ahead, like a man who had just detonated a bomb and was waiting to see what remained. He didn't have to wait long. The door flung open, slamming against the wall with a force that sent a ripple through the entire hospitality unit. Frederic Vasseur strode in like a general returning from a battlefield he hadn't agreed to fight. His face was flushed with rage, his jaw locked tight, and his eyes, normally calculating and composed, burned with betrayal. "You've got 5 seconds to explain what the hell that was," he growled, his voice low but razor-sharp, slicing through the silence like a blade. 5 seconds, Lewis. Because right now, I'm standing in the middle of a media inferno that you ignited." Lewis didn't flinch. He didn't even look up. He took a slow sip from the bottle, his hand steady, his breathing measured. When he finally raised his gaze, it was colder than winter steel. "I told the truth," he said flatly. "I gave the fans what they deserve. Honesty." Vassour's expression twisted into something between disbelief and fury. He stepped forward, closing the gap, his voice rising with each word. "You called out your engineers on live television. You questioned the strategy team. You implied Ferrari isn't fighting to win. Are you out of your goddamn mind?" Hamilton stood now slowly, the chair scraping against the floor with an eerie screech. He faced Vassour directly, no sign of intimidation, no retreat. "Are we fighting to win?" he asked, eyes locked onto Vassour's. "Because from where I'm standing, it feels like we're running in circles, hoping the storm passes while pretending we're in control." Frederick's face turned a deeper shade of red. "You think you're the only one who's frustrated," he spat. "Everyone in this garage is working 20 hours a day to give you a car that can compete. And what do? Undermine all of it with a smug soundbite and a microphone. That's not leadership, Lewis. That's sabotage." The word lingered in the air like poison. Sabotage. Lewis took a step closer, his voice low and biting. "What sabotage," he snapped back, "is building an entire team around fantasy instead of facing the brutal facts. We're not contenders. We haven't been for years. But you keep dressing this up like we're one step away from glory. We're miles behind, Fred. And no one in this room has the guts to say it. So I did." Vassour's fists clenched at his sides. He looked like he wanted to throw something, anything, but instead he leaned in, his voice now barely more than a whisper, but colder than a glacier. "You walked into Ferrari, thinking you'd resurrect the legend. That your name alone would drag us out of the mud. But here we are, 15 races in, and you're getting outclassed by Charles every single weekend. Same equipment. Same updates. He's evolving. You're disintegrating." Hamilton's eyes narrowed. There was no shock. No surprise. Only contempt. "You want to play the Charles card," he said, voice rising now. "He's been here for half a decade. Knows the system. The people. The politics. And yet he's still fourth in the standings, just like me. Don't talk to me about being outclassed. Talk to me about systems that don't work. Talk to me about upgrades that arrive late and fail. Talk to me about strategy calls that cost us 10 seconds, week after week." Vassour exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You're deflecting," he hissed. "You're turning a spotlight away from your own shortcomings. You've lost your edge, Lewis. You're not the predator you once were." That one hurt. It showed in the twitch of Hamilton's jaw, the flare in his nostrils. But he didn't back down. Instead, he stepped forward until they were practically nose to nose. "You think I've lost my edge," he whispered. "I dragged a team through 8 years of war and turned it into a dynasty. I fought through cars that were barely podium-worthy and still made magic happen. I know exactly what I'm capable of. But magic doesn't work without trust. And right now, I don't trust the people behind me to stop us from sinking." Outside the room, the rest of the team stood frozen, pretending to work, ears tilted toward the closed door. Some were texting. Others were already notifying PR. Journalists were circling like vultures outside, having sensed blood in the water. Inside, the air was nuclear. Frederick Vassour finally pulled back. His voice dropped to an icy whisper, each word deliberate, venomous. "You've just fractured the spine of this team," he said. "Whatever hope we had of fixing this internally, gone. Whatever respect you had from the pit wall, it's hanging by a thread. One more outburst like that, and I swear to God, I don't care how many titles you've won, I will bench you." Hamilton blinked slowly, the corner of his mouth curling into the faintest, most dangerous smile. "You do that," he said, stepping back. "And let's see how long the sponsors stick around when the biggest name on your payroll is watching from the garage." Silence. A new kind of silence. The kind that follows an earthquake. Vassour turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. The whole suite jolted. Conversations resumed, but only as cover for racing thoughts. Ferrari wasn't just at war with its rivals anymore. It was devouring itself from within. And the world was watching, second by second, waiting for the next explosion. That single syllable didn't just sting, it detonated in Lewis's chest like a landmine. Soft. He stood motionless for a fraction of a second, but something inside him shifted violently. The room seemed to tilt. Time didn't slow down, it snapped in half. No one dared speak. No one dared move. Even the overhead lights felt like they dimmed under the weight of what had just been said. Lewis straightened his spine like he was stepping into a battlefield. His jaw locked, expression tightening into something terrifyingly composed. Controlled fury. A storm barely caged beneath skin and sinew. You said soft. His voice was gravel, dragged through fire and ice. Not raised, not loud. Just lethal. Like a blade drawn slowly across stone. Across the room, Vasseur didn't even blink. The team principal leaned forward on the desk, his stare steady, brutal, unapologetic. That's right, he snapped. You walk around like the paddock owes you something. Like history should carry you across the finish line. But here, at Ferrari, history is a burden, not a trophy. You don't inherit victories. You fight tooth and nail for them, every lap, every tire stint, every sector. And right now, what I see is a man dragging a legacy around like it's enough. But you're not fighting, Lewis. You're just existing. You're hiding behind the myth. It was a straight punch to the soul. But Lewis didn't flinch. He stepped forward, deliberate, unstoppable. No theatrics. Just silent power. He was the eye of the hurricane now, and Vasseur was about to feel the full force of the wind. You think I'm hiding? He said, teeth clenched so hard his voice came out in tremors. I've fought for every inch of my career. I've walked into races with 3 wheels and no hope, and still made it matter. I've outdriven machines that had no business being in Q3, let alone on a podium. I've broken bones, lost titles, buried teammates, and still kept showing up. You think I'm here to coast? He took another step forward, close enough now that even the air between them burned. I don't need to be reminded what Ferrari stands for, he spat. Every time I put on this red suit, I feel it crushing me. The weight of expectations. The ghosts. The press. The tifosi screaming for blood when we don't deliver. But don't you dare confuse my frustration with surrender. I haven't given up. I'm suffocating in this car that refuses to obey. I'm pushing beyond the grip, beyond the limit, and it still fights me like I'm the enemy. His voice broke for a half second. Not from weakness, but from the sheer emotional torque behind every word. You want to talk about fire? He hissed. I haven't just got fire, I'm combusting inside this cockpit. Watching weekends slip through my fingers because this machine doesn't respond. And still, I climb back in. I strap in. I give you everything. But if you think you're lighting a fire under me, Fred, you're already too late. The fire's been there. It's been burning since Bahrain. Vasseur's expression wavered, just for a beat. The unshakable general met the fury of a 7-time world champion, and for the first time in weeks, his certainty cracked. But he didn't step back. Pride wouldn't let him. Pressure wouldn't let him. We don't have time for drama, Lewis, he said, quieter now. We need results. And I need a car that responds, Lewis snapped. Give me a machine that does what I ask, and I'll give you pole positions. Give me grip when I turn in, give me power out of the corners, give me a damn strategy that doesn't implode halfway through the race, and I'll bring home more than just points. I'll bring you redemption. The silence that followed was volcanic. Everything unsaid trembled in the air between them. Both men breathing hard, 2 titans locked in a staring contest that wasn't just about racing, it was about identity. About survival. Hamilton didn't back down. Vasseur didn't blink. But something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't a conversation. It was a declaration of war. Not against each other, but against failure, against mediocrity, against the myth that Ferrari was still invincible. In that moment, in the cold heart of Maranello, one truth echoed louder than any engine. If Ferrari wanted to rise again, the fire had to come from within. And Lewis Hamilton? He was already burning. Lewis Hamilton didn't move. The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade, poised and merciless. Every syllable from Frederick Vasseur's mouth had carried the weight of a verdict, not a discussion. The atmosphere in the Maranello office was suffocating, heavy with the scent of betrayal, frustration, and the unmistakable realization that something irreversible had just happened. "No, Lewis," Vasseur had said, his voice measured but simmering with a quiet, dangerous intensity. "I don't believe you hate losing enough. If you did, you'd stop drowning in excuses and start steering this team forward. Charles is the one pulling us up. You're dragging us under." The words didn't just land, they detonated. They carved deep into Hamilton's pride, sharper than any on-track defeat. For a man who had built his legacy on resilience, on defying impossible odds, hearing this from his own team principal was like being told his career was already buried. This wasn't the public-friendly Vasseur from press conferences. This was the man behind closed doors, the man who could end careers with a single sentence. The silence afterward was thick enough to choke on. Two alpha personalities stood only a few feet apart, breathing hard, glaring at each other like heavyweight fighters between rounds. No engineers to step in, no PR staff to smooth things over, just raw, unfiltered confrontation. Then Vasseur unleashed the final, irrecoverable blow. "It's over. This is the start of your exit. The board's already reached its conclusion. Legal will be in touch this week. You want the truth? You're no longer the driver this team needs. You're not fit to wear Ferrari red." There was no anger in his voice now, only certainty. And that was worse. Hamilton's mind flashed back to the day Vasseur convinced him to join Ferrari. The promises of building a new dynasty, of making history together, of etching his name alongside Schumacher's. Now, those words felt like ash in his mouth. Everything had changed. This wasn't a warning. This was the final chapter, slammed shut before Hamilton could even write the ending. He stared at Vasseur, his jaw locked tight, fighting the urge to lash out. Not verbally, no, Hamilton's fury ran deeper than words. He was calculating, processing. The man across from him had just tried to strip away his identity, his authority, his role as a leader. And yet, deep inside, Hamilton could feel something else stirring, a dangerous, familiar defiance. Vasseur leaned back slightly, his eyes narrowing. "You think this is personal?" His voice was calm now, almost too calm. "It's not. This is surgery. The infection has to go, Lewis. We gave you every tool, every resource. And instead of igniting the fire in this team, you smothered it. You wanted an empire handed to you. We needed a gladiator. What we got was a ghost." Hamilton's hands curled into fists at his sides, nails pressing into his palms. He stepped forward, his voice low, almost a growl. "You think I'm finished?" "No," Vasseur replied without missing a beat. "I think we're finished. Whether you're finished, that's the question you have to answer." The tension was unbearable, the kind that could crush a room into silence. Outside, the summer sun was blazing over the Ferrari factory, mechanics hustling in the garages, engineers running simulations for the next race. The team was moving forward. But inside this room, history was being rewritten in real time. The board's decision was already set in motion. Names were being whispered as potential replacements: Lando Norris, Carlos Sainz returning, even Fernando Alonso for one last dance in red. The media would feast on this. The paddock would explode. And Hamilton? He was already a walking headline. But beneath the humiliation, something else was brewing. This wasn't the first time Lewis Hamilton had been told he was done. And every single time before, he had answered with victories that silenced his critics. He turned toward the door, each step slow, deliberate. He didn't slam it. He didn't look back. But in his mind, the calculations had begun. This wasn't going to be the quiet end Ferrari wanted. This was going to be an escalation. A declaration. If they wanted war, they were about to get one. Because in that moment, Lewis Hamilton wasn't thinking about retirement. He was thinking about revenge. And the rest of Formula One had no idea what was coming. And just like that, he spun on his heel and disappeared, his footsteps echoing through the hallway with an almost theatrical finality. No dramatic slam of a door. No raised voice. Just that sharp exit, deliberate and surgical, leaving behind an oppressive silence that clung to the walls like fog. Lewis remained frozen in place, jaw clenched, eyes unfocused, every muscle locked as though his body refused to register what had just happened. His breathing slowed, shallow and uncertain. He wasn't shocked by the words. He'd known they were coming. But the way they'd been delivered, stripped of empathy, wrapped in veiled contempt, hit him like a gut punch. The paddock had long since quieted, the media circus faded into the night, the last of the journalists retreating to their hotels to spin tomorrow's headlines. But the residue of the confrontation lingered like smoke in Lewis's chest. He moved slowly through the team facilities, avoiding eye contact, ducking behind tinted visors and the hood of his black jumper, trying to shield himself from the curious stares, the whispered speculation. That day had been brutal, not on the stopwatch, but emotionally. The car had felt like it was fighting him at every turn, like it had a mind of its own and no interest in cooperation. He'd tried everything: setup changes, tire pressure tweaks, pushing the limits, pulling back, adapting his style. Nothing clicked. And when he finally returned to the garage, helmet off, drenched in sweat and doubt, the cold exchange with the team principal had sealed the spiral. No reassurance. No understanding. Just brutal honesty served without compassion. It wasn't just a bad race. It was a question mark over everything. Hours passed. The team debrief came and went. Engineers muttered numbers. Analysts reviewed sectors. But none of them could offer what Lewis needed: clarity. Or peace. Eventually, in the stillness of the night, with most of the staff gone and the hospitality area dimly lit, Charles Leclerc wandered back into the motorhome. He'd meant to leave already, but something nagged at him. A strange sense of unfinished business. A voice in his head kept telling him Lewis wasn't okay. As he stepped inside, he spotted him, alone, tucked into the corner booth, hood pulled low over his head, headphones on, posture slouched and closed off. The image struck Charles deeply. He had seen champions vulnerable before, but this was different. This wasn't frustration. This was erosion. Charles approached slowly, with a quiet kind of reverence, and slid into the booth beside him. He didn't speak right away. There was no need to rush. Sometimes, silence speaks louder than words. "I heard what happened," he said eventually, his voice soft but certain. Lewis didn't turn. Didn't react. Just muttered under his breath, "It's irrelevant." Charles shook his head slightly. "It's not." He waited. Gave it space. And slowly, Lewis removed his headphones, letting them rest in his lap. He finally looked up, eyes tired, rimmed with frustration, but more than that, clouded with something heavier: disconnection. "You don't have to sugarcoat it," Lewis said, voice flat. "I'm not performing. I can see the telemetry. I know the gaps. I know I'm not delivering. The car isn't working with me, and I'm failing to decode it. It's like it's speaking a language I don't understand." Charles took a deep breath. "Believe me, I know the feeling. This machine, it's unpredictable. It punishes aggression and ignores finesse. It's like trying to tame a storm with your bare hands. But I've been dancing with this storm for 3 seasons now. I know when it spins. You're still learning its rhythm." Lewis let out a half-laugh, bitter and hollow. "Learning? I'm supposed to teach this team how to win again. That's what I came here to do. But instead, I feel like a rookie getting schooled by his younger teammate. You're calm in the chaos. I'm drowning in it." Charles's eyes softened. "You're not the only one who's ever felt that way. The first time I drove this chassis, I hated it. I wanted to throw the steering wheel through the screen. But I had time. I had seasons to adapt, to evolve with it. You've been given weeks. And everyone expects miracles because your name is Lewis Hamilton. That's not fair, not to you, not to anyone." Lewis looked down at his hands. They didn't tremble, but they felt foreign to him. These were the hands that gripped the wheel at Silverstone in 2008 through torrential rain. The hands that had tamed W12S, outdueled Rosberg, Vettel, Verstappen. The same hands now felt like they belonged to a stranger. "I thought coming here would reignite something in me," he said, voice low, almost confessional. "Instead, I feel disconnected, from the car, from the team, even from myself. Like the magic's gone." Charles didn't interrupt. He let the weight of that sentence settle. Then he leaned in, elbows on the table, tone grounding. "You're not disconnected. You're just being forced to adapt in real time, under microscope. This isn't about magic, it's about redefinition. You're not here to repeat the past. You're here to rewrite it. That takes time." and pain, and silence like this. Lewis turned to him, eyes narrowed. And if the silence doesn't end? Then you scream louder, Charles replied. Or whisper smarter. Either way, you don't stop speaking to the machine. One day, it'll listen. There was a long pause. The air between them grew still, thick with unspoken understanding. The rivalry that everyone assumed defined them was absent here. No ego. No tension. Just two warriors in the same war, different trenches. I appreciate you saying that, Lewis said at last, quietly. Even if I don't believe it yet. You don't have to believe it now, Charles replied. Just don't stop showing up. That's what makes you dangerous. Not your history, but your hunger. Lewis nodded slowly, absorbing the words like they were medicine. Bitter, but necessary. Charles stood, gave him a firm clap on the shoulder, and offered a small, genuine smile. Get some sleep. The next battle starts in a few hours. As he walked away, Lewis didn't call after him. Didn't move. But something in his expression shifted. A flicker of something deeply buried, peeking through the cracks. Not hope. Not yet. But maybe, belief. Or at least the first brick of it. And in that quiet corner of the motorhome, beneath the weight of expectations and the ghosts of greatness, Lewis Hamilton remained seated, still broken, still questioning, but not quite as alone as before. Lewis Hamilton sat motionless, the low hum of the rain tapping against the motorhome roof like a metronome of finality. He stared blankly into the window, but the reflection that looked back at him wasn't a seven-time world champion. It was a man betrayed by the very dream he had dared to believe in. The Ferrari logo on his suit sleeve felt like a branding now, not a badge of honor. The silence around him was thick, crushing, unnatural. A kind of stillness that only follows a storm you never saw coming. The door creaked open. No knock. No hesitation. Charles Leclerc stepped in, his footsteps careful, his presence heavy with unsaid words. He didn't offer comfort. He didn't need to. He just stood there for a moment, watching his teammate, his rival, his friend, slowly unravel. Lewis didn't turn. They've already decided, he muttered, voice laced with bitter clarity. Haven't they? Charles sighed through his nose, jaw flexing. Yes, he finally admitted, voice hushed. It's happening. Quietly. But it's real. Hamilton's shoulders dropped slightly, not in defeat, but in confirmation. Like a man who had felt the noose tightening for weeks, but refused to believe it until it finally pulled. They're cutting me loose. They're preparing the exit, Charles said quietly, like a confession he hated giving. Legal is involved. I heard the internal meetings have already started. The sponsors know. It's just a matter of when now, not if. The words stung, but they didn't surprise him. He'd felt it coming. The cold stares. The lack of updates. The radio silence after races. The sudden disappearance of post-session debriefs. Ferrari wasn't just turning the page. They were erasing a chapter before it had been written. This wasn't a mutual split. It was an execution in slow motion. And the paddock? The paddock knew. The whispers had transformed into thunderclaps behind closed doors. PR teams on both sides were frantically crafting a story, a united narrative to shield the world from the ugly truth. But the truth doesn't bend. It breaks. Hamilton hadn't come to Ferrari for money. He hadn't come for vanity. He'd come because he believed. Because somewhere in the red of that prancing horse, he saw the chance to etch one more miracle into his legacy. To silence the doubters. To win not just races, but respect. Instead, he was walking straight into the fire. Fred Vasseur, once seen as the orchestrator of Ferrari's future, had gone cold on Hamilton faster than the winter wind in Montreal. What began as quiet disagreements over development paths turned into stone-cold silence. Decisions were made without consultation. Meetings were skipped. Technical input was dismissed. Respect turned transactional. And every time Lewis tried to pull the team together, the machine pushed back harder, more distant, more arrogant. They didn't want a partner. They wanted a puppet. And Lewis Hamilton never played that part. Behind the scenes, lawyers combed through every line of the contract, searching for escape routes. Clauses. Loopholes. Graceful exits that wouldn't upset shareholders. There was no scandal. No smoking gun. Just an elite institution preparing to discard one of the greatest to ever touch a steering wheel, because they couldn't handle his presence, his voice, or the mirror he held up to them. Charles sat beside him now, unsure of what to say, because deep down he knew, this was never about pace. It wasn't about age. It wasn't about performance. It was about culture, ego, insecurity. It was about Ferrari being so married to its myth that it couldn't coexist with another living legend. And as Japan loomed on the calendar, everyone pretended it was business as usual. Press releases were rehearsed. Media day was scheduled. Smiles were faked. But the soul of this saga wasn't hiding anymore. It was bleeding. Hamilton walked through the paddock like a gladiator in exile. Some heads turned in pity, others in shame. But a few, those who really understood, watched with reverence. Because they knew what it meant to be pushed out, not because you failed, but because your presence reminded people of their own. Ferrari hadn't broken him, but they had misunderstood him. Completely. They thought they were hiring a driver, but they got a storm. A visionary. A voice. A force too powerful for an institution still worshipping the past. And somewhere, deep in the heart of Maranello, those boardroom suits will eventually ask themselves the question they refuse to confront. Why didn't it work? They'll talk about clashes, about dynamics, about direction, but they'll never admit the truth. They weren't ready. Not for the change he represented. Not for the evolution he demanded. Not for a future that didn't look exactly like their past. Because Ferrari didn't lose Hamilton. They pushed him out. And whatever comes next, Audi, Aston Martin, retirement, or something nobody sees coming, Lewis will rise. Because that's what giants do when walls collapse around them. They walk out of the ashes with scars, yes, but also with fire. And as for Ferrari, they'll remember him. Not as the man who failed them, but as the one they failed. And that legacy? That will burn longer than any title. Because in Formula One, trophies fade. Dynasties end. But moments of truth, of bravery, of standing tall when everything is stacked against you, those moments become legend. And Lewis Hamilton? He is legend. Not because of Ferrari, but in spite of it.